Hi everyone, welcome to the Safe Place Therapy YouTube and podcast channel. My name is Stuart Cheverton and I am a mental health social worker and one of the owners of Safe Place Therapy. And today the topic line is I Hate Mindfulness, and there's a big reason why we're throwing out such a big title there. We'll get into that in a second, but hopefully that resonates with lots of people who might have had issues in the past with mindfulness and kind of talking about that discussion further. But before we kind of jump in, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands in which we meet today and record this session. We're recording today on the lands of the Kulin Nation, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. And so we actually have with us Sophie and Steph. And do you want to just go ahead and introduce yourselves?
Yep. So I'm Stephanie, she, her. I'm a provisional psychologist at Safe Place Therapy.
Great.
And I'm Sophie, she, her, and I'm a counselor at Safe Place.
Great, awesome, welcome, and thanks for coming along. To our kind of topic line, the I hate mindfulness or I hate meditation, usually with the end bullshit that clients sometimes say when they first come into counselling with us. I'm wondering, how about we just start with, have you either of you had that example of a client saying that, and what's that been like hearing that?
Yeah, quite a lot. I think so. Yeah, I've had clients tell me, they hate mindfulness, they hate meditation, breathing exercises, all those kind of related sort of techniques, I think, related to mindfulness.
Yeah.
Clients, before we even get close to that, tell me, don't suggest that to me because I hate that.
Yep.
Which is, we'll get into that, I'm sure, why that's really fair.
Just breathe, okay? Like, don't even try it. Breathe, it's fine, I'm alive. Don't tell me to breathe differently.
Yes. And we'll get into the kind of deeper things as to why that might be the case from like a psychological aspect or perspective. But generally speaking, usually when people say that, they've probably had a not great experience with a counsellor previously where they've kind of been pushed to do it or pushed to do something. The counsellor, takes something off the metaphorical, bookshelf, they dust it off and go, here you go, we're going to do this thing, and kind of push that as an idea. So a couple of clients, so I used to actually work at Headspace and worked with a lot of teenagers, and their idea of working with a school counselor or something is they've put this activity in front of them to try some, slowing your breathing down or mindfulness exercise, and there's quite a few different reasons as to why that doesn't go well. So maybe we just jump straight into neurodiversity or ADHD as kind of reason number one. So there's other reasons, but we'll stick with this first. What is your kind of take on ADHD being a problem for mindfulness or meditation tools?
So the biggest one is we get distracted.
Yeah.
It's very hard to sort of empty our head of thoughts and things when there's just so much happening. We can never be in a perfectly quiet environment. There's going to be a car alarm down the street. There's going to be traffic noises or a random cat. There's going to be random thoughts. Because ADHD isn't that we can't pay attention. It is too much attention. We tune into too many things and we can't stay with what we're working on.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult for us. And also we love fidgeting.
Yeah.
It's hard to get us to sit still, hence the fidgets that we bring to these. We want to be in motion.
So even just the idea of sitting in a room and then, thinking about your thoughts or trying to do an exercise where you're focusing on just your breathing can be really hard for people who, their brain's bouncing all over the place.
Yeah, that's it. Exactly. And getting, what Steph was saying about kind of paying quite a lot of attention to every little bit of stimuli or information and that can be your own thoughts as well. You know, a lot of what they teach in mindfulness and meditation is to watch your thoughts drift by and let them just float away. And that can be really hard for someone with ADHD whose you know, psychological makeup is more inclined to make them get quite hooked on every thought, you know, and still get hooked on the next one and the next one and the next.
Yeah. What I think is important, because a lot of people kind of throw out the word mindfulness, the word meditation, the word grounding quite a bit and kind of use them interchangeably. So first off, I think it would be good to kind of define each of them. So mindfulness isn't actually meant to be about focus your brain per se. It's actually about awareness. Where is your awareness? So if your awareness is with the car outside, if your awareness is with the dog bark, if your awareness about my voice and how weird it sounds, that's actually okay. So, you know, by just looking at the definition straight up, we can actually take that idea, that definition, and run with it through different ways, right? So instead of just sitting still, what would it be like to wave your arms, you know, in a circle again and again? How do your hands feel? How do your arms feel? What's your breathing like as you're doing it? Now let's go the other way. Mindfulness doesn't have to be this sitting still and doing very little.
Yeah, it's so true. It doesn't have to be about especially more with meditation, like emptying your mind and quietening your mind. Yes, maybe more when we go into meditation specifically.
Yes.
Specific what is meditation, but mindfulness, like you said, is so much more broad, it's so much more flexible, can be so many more things, but can give you just as many benefits. And
Exactly. And I think that misinformation, or that it's not explained enough, and how it then can be tailored to a client and their brain experience, you know, that's the missing gap that I think a lot of people miss out on, or turn off quickly to, because they think they're kind of the same thing, right?
Yeah, they definitely get lumped in together.
Yes.
It's I feel a bit for the Indian culture that this has all come from, because we have definitely taken bits and pieces from it and turned it into something that is more palatable to a Western audience. But with that, there is a huge range of different ways to meditate or to be mindful. And it really is just about being present in the moment when it comes to mindfulness. And I think that's what really took off when you had all those mindful coloring in books. Because you're with every stroke of the pen, you're with every movement, you're in this sort of picture, you're focusing on this tiny section and just coloring that in.
Yeah.
Now everyone's like, yeah, I'm done with that. Stop it.
Maybe. Or what that is kind of tacking onto is an interest that person might have, right? I like coloring. I like the movement. I like being really specific, even how I'm using the pencil or how I'm kind of doing the coloring. There's so many bits that, again, the client has control over, and tailoring it to themselves.
You're right. I think it's so much easier to do when, we tailor it to someone and go with what they're actually interested in, what it's going to be easy for them to enjoy putting all that awareness onto. Because, like you were saying before, Stu, it's not so much about focusing and quietening. It's just about being aware of whatever it is that's going on.
Yes.
In your internal experience or your immediate environment, whatever it is you're choosing. It's just awareness. Another types of like even fidgeting is something that we can be really mindful of doing. We can do it in a really mindless way, and that can be really helpful. It can help us be a bit more calm and a bit more present. Or it's something that we could really dive into. Like I could just really notice what these little balls in my little fidget feel like in my fingers, and maybe I could try the back of my hand and see how that's different. And that's mindfulness.
Yes, exactly. Cool. And so therefore the basic mindfulness tricks or tools need to be adapted for the client's brain. And what this kind of opportunity, this idea, this whole concept is about is, how is the client's brain? right? How busy is it? Does it have, two streams of thought at the same time? Is it, in fancy words, tangential? So it's jumping here to jumping there to jumping there. Just by capturing that, by testing some of this stuff out, can go a long way to understand the client and build a nice framework that works for them.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. And I think maybe, as you were saying before, Stu, I think a lot of people maybe haven't had that experience
Yep.
with mental health therapists, and so maybe come in feeling like mindfulness is this really prescriptive,
Yep.
difficult thing that they just do,
Yeah.
because it's been maybe pushed on them in a way that just doesn't fit them.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, cool. So that's kind of group number one, or problem number one, related to neurodiversity. I guess autism too, right? Like, to kind of really hone into that. Sometimes people get lost in language or get lost in specific details of instructions. And mindfulness activities, usually there's a do this, now do this, now do this. But if you're lost at step one, and the counselor's trying to explain step 2 and step 3, you've already lost them. Right? You need to actually walk through step 1. What's your understanding of step 1? When people think, imagine imagine a stream of water. Okay, is it a river? Is it a creek? Like, what is it? Right? Like, I've had so many clients go, well, hold on a second, like, we need to stop there. When you say this, is that this? Is this okay? Like, now I've got this jungle over here. Is it okay to be in a jungle? Or what about this? Is it, like, you can get so lost, and sometimes you need to really break down the reason for it. So kind of intellectualizing, conceptualizing what we're trying to do here, and then the openness, the flexibility of this thing. Again, whether you have, if you're on the spectrum and you think a bit differently, or in neurodiversity in a broader way with ADHD or a busy brain.
Yeah, that's also a good example of how we can tailor to a client as well, if we know they might have a tendency to need for instructions to be really specific.
Yeah.
So that there's no room for them to kind of get lost and not be sure in what direction to go in. Doing a bit more of that work beforehand to explain what we're going to do and what the reasoning and the meaning, the purpose of it is, what it's going to look like. Yeah.
Group number 2 that sometimes I find interesting, that I think maybe lots of us can ascribe to, and that is simply a busy brain, right? So we've got ADHD brain, that you whether you've been diagnosed with that or you think that might be going on for you, but people who literally have so many things going on, they're stressed at work, or there's a lot of emotions bubbling up for them, or they're just so used to shit being all over the shop, which is different to ADHD. And for people like that, I think it is really important to maybe introduce multiple stimuli. So you could have some kind of physical stuff that you're doing at the same time, or you could be just helping them do a bit of a checklist, of what they need to do after they leave the session, or just checking in on how busy their brain is. So if their busyness is literally, 8 out of 10, it's going to be super hard to do this, yeah?
And some strategies around that is, if we're going to spend some time trying to be mindful, it can help to have a little notepad nearby, because if our brain suddenly goes to, I need to put this on the grocery list, we're going to be so distracted.
Yeah.
And it can also be helpful to have something that we can tune into. So that might be have music playing that can help us, hold over some of our brain a little bit while we do something mindfully.
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost like sometimes clients need a bit of a landing, right? They need to kind of, come in from work, they've had a really busy day and they've still got that email in their brain, or their boss is in their head telling them what to do, etc. And they just need a bit more of a softer, slower landing to get to some kind of more calmer space. Isn't it funny that you kind of need a bit of a calm brain to get to a calmer brain, right? Yeah.
You do a bit. Yeah. Like this little bit of calmness gets you close to a little bit more calmness. And yeah, it's a gradual thing for sure.
Yep.
And yeah, having more of those kind of tools, like more stimulation there for someone who is used to just being very stimulated a lot of the time, probably really helps them kind of in those gradual steps.
Yeah. Yeah. Which moves me into kind of another definition around grounding, right? So the idea of grounding is, are we up here? So our thoughts bouncing around and we're all over the shop and we're kind of, camping, living up here, or do we feel in our body? Do we feel that we can notice, us sitting in the seat? If we wiggle our toes, does that feel a bit weird? Do we feel a bit connected with our head and our body, or is it all zoomy up here?
Yeah, and that's one where you often get the, what are 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear? I think I can never remember the order of that. I'm trying to be mad.
That's right.
That's the sort of main grounding tool that I think people are most familiar with and can also be most frustrated with, because sometimes the issue is that they are using it to completely avoid how they're feeling.
Yes.
And we can't get rid of our emotions. We can't shove them under the carpet. We can definitely suppress them, but it's not really healthy.
Yes.
But grounding techniques aren't going to magically make them go away.
Yes.
They're just helping you anchor while something is happening. And then letting that sort of blow over a bit. And as a little bit of time passes, it will get a little bit easier to deal with.
Yep.
So it can be very important with grounding techniques to focus on bringing you back into your body and into the environment. So I always think of grounding like a tree. We've got our root system, our little toeses are feeling the grass, but we're digging into the dirt. We're bringing ourselves back into the world.
Yeah. Really good segue into group number 3, people who have experienced trauma, or as you say, Steph, there's a big emotional stuff here that we're trying to escape from, or we live up here for a reason, A, because we're busy, or B, because we feel too much here. This is like, the floodgates are opening when we access this, particularly for people who might experience significant, like abuse trauma. Getting someone to focus on their breathing can be a trauma trigger. So yeah, have any of you experienced that by asking a client to ground and that kind of trigger happening?
Yeah, for sure. I think, especially with people who've experienced trauma, and especially abuse trauma, that grounding into the body can be really distressing. Because the body can be in a really kind of hypervigilant fight or flight kind of state that maybe living very much up in your head keeps you a little bit dissociated from. And so grounding back into that can connect you to what might be a lot of distress you're kind of keeping pushed down a lot of the time. And then so I think that those clients often do need a different approach. Like they might need more of that gentle landing that we were talking about before. That gentle landing might just be a bit longer. And we might need to be a bit more creative about just being curious about really neutral parts of the body, like maybe your knees. What do your knees feel like right now, rather than just trying to tune into the body altogether, or going straight to where we tend to feel feelings, like in our chest, for example, and our shoulders, stomach, things like that.
It could also be something where clients that have a lot of chronic pain or an injury or disability, going into the body is where everything hurts.
Yes.
So it can also be very difficult if they're dealing with those kinds of issues, and we're bringing them into that kind of space as well.
So it's kind of having a little bit of a history check, or understanding, we might not get things right all the time, but sometimes just asking or knowing a little bit about the client's background first is important before we jump into some of this stuff. But the thing about body, there's a famous researcher, Babette Rothschild, that wrote a book called The Body Remembers. And sometimes we actually aren't aware, right? We're not actually cognizant of what's held here, especially if we've lived up here forever, right?
Sometimes those triggers, if they happen, can be a bit useful, if you come across some new, like, oh, that's a trigger for me. I didn't know that. And I didn't know that maybe I was holding so much in this part of my body.
Yeah.
That can be hard, but that can also be a really useful thing, a really big opportunity for some learning, some growth, some healing.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, yeah, you can actually come back to this stuff, right? So if this feels a bit too hard or you don't want to go there, sometimes you might actually intellectualize some things that you've been going through and talk about, issues in your life, relationship, etc., and actually stay up here for a bit longer to build some safety, to build some rapport with the clinician first before you jump into body stuff, before you jump into mindfulness as a thing.
Yeah, I think most things are easier when you've got a good relationship, got a good rapport with your therapist, but especially things that can be a little bit more vulnerable, like tapping into your body, especially if, and I think a lot of us do, spend a lot of time in our heads because it's very encouraged by our culture. You can, achieve a lot by living very much in your head. And so, yeah, I think it's a really common problem. But so it is definitely a defense, right? A kind of coping mechanism. And so trying to poke at that a bit and see what that's protecting you from, be vulnerable. And so having that relationship's really important. And that's where, all that stuff about finding the right therapist for you and everything like that's going to be really important.
That safety net, really.
Yeah.
Is there any tools that you have worked that are kind of different to mindfulness that you would kind of do as an alternative? Is there any ideas that you think help settle a client into grounding or mindfulness, like a bit down the track?
I think just being creative with it, and going with how they're already presenting. Like, I don't know, they might already be fidgeting with something, or they might spend a lot of time in a certain position on the couch or something like that. I think just kind of I think it's a very organic process for me. I think I kind of just go with what's happening for them in that moment. And go with what I'm curious about and ask about that and ask them if they want to be curious about what that internal experience is like in their body or with whatever they're fidgeting with. I think I just try to have no idea about like right and wrong, basically, and that it is just about building awareness and curiosity.
Yeah. One little tool that I test out with some people just to see how they are at trying that if they're willing to, and that might actually be getting some emotional stimuli, something that has a little bit of a spark to it, but not too much. And then going, let's check in with your body about that, right? So what does it feel to do a little bit of a body scan? How does it feel in your tummy? How does it feel in your chest about work, right? What happens when I say work? What happens internally, right? So that can be one way of, let's check in. Is that okay? And then you're kind of boxing things up. You're kind of directing it. You're kind of using a bit of specific pathway to get them used to the idea.
And I like to use art therapy as well and incorporate that into this. So I've got a big bit of masonite down here, and we've got rolls of paper. So we clip them up. We've got oil pastels, and it's really good for kids, but adults too. Run them through what color feels like, which emotion, and then how does that feel to draw it?
Nice.
Because there will sometimes be people that can't access something like maybe anger. They just sort of, you tell them, try anger, and they just kind of look at you like, and then they, do little twirlies. It's like, but you can tell with that we're not able to make that connection. There's something that's really keeping us out of that space, which can indicate that we've got a bunch of history around probably suppressing that or avoiding that might be helpful to sort of explore slowly. So that can also be, I think, a useful way to get into that space because you're using something that's tactile. You're exploring what emotion feels like in the body, but in a smaller area. So it's like, how does this feel just in your arm? Is it a slow, soft movement? Are we being more aggressive and rigid? And that can be, I think, in some ways a lot safer than exploring the body itself.
Yeah. Yeah, and back to neurodiversity, or just people not having a whole lot of knowledge about grounding and what the hell it is maybe you need to go back and kind of pick a few moments where they probably are more grounded just in their general day, like, after you've had a big gym session, usually you feel a bit more like your breathing's probably a bit heavier, you can feel your muscles, you can kind of feel all tension here, tension there. That usually indicates that you are more in your body. Or you might be in the shower and you're scrubbing away and you're kind of, kind of pushing different like pressure points and stuff. Again, maybe, not always, could be just a way for you to go, look, you're actually doing it already. Now can we ramp it up a little bit? Now can we just stay in that just a little bit longer and build that okayness level?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I think that's great as well. Just working with whatever they're already doing, whatever they are experiencing, times where they're maybe more mindful.
Yeah.
And building. Yeah, it's so true. Yeah, I just remembered how I like to get clients to just kind of try to get their blood pumping a little bit, especially if they are feeling kind of quite low or slumped over and just feeling more on the sad, depressed side of things. And what it's like to just sit up straighter, or maybe just kind of pat their thighs a little bit, just shake their arms around and see the change, going, we're not trying to make anything happen here, just see how you feel different when you move your body in a certain way. And again, it's just the awareness, right? Just noticing how you feel changes, how your state changes. Not trying to control it, not trying to make yourself calmer or anything like that.
That reminds me, I've had this one client, and gorgeous client, came in really nervous, and it was a couple sessions in, and they'd still sit very, very closed, very, very closed off. They couldn't sort of relax in their space yet. And I ended up sort of challenging them, like, you're sitting on the edge of your seat, you're having a very small amount of space. What would it feel like to just spread out?
Yeah.
And like they sort of did it, and they got like real comfy, and they sort of like burrowed into like the cushions and everything. That they spread out, and so like this is nicer actually. And they sort of ended up coming back to some like a sort of medium in terms of spreadness. And like this actually feels a lot better. Like they hadn't noticed at all the tension they were carrying and that sort of closedness that they were exhibiting.
That's a great, you're both bringing out really good examples of what we call in the psych world as attunement, right? You're attuning to what they're kind of presenting, whether they know it or not, right? And you go, what's going on here? And there might be actually nothing. It might be just how they normally sit, sure. But is there a bit of flexibility? Is there a bit of malleability? And then if we shift that a little bit, what is that like? Do they actually slow down and regulate and, connect more with their bodies, which is called grounding? Or do they loosen up and feel more okay and comfortable in the space? Like, we really need to tune in with what we're presenting as counselors as a tool or a thing, but also what they're presenting. And as soon as you might say mindfulness and you just get this recoil from them, maybe not a great idea. Or maybe you need to talk about it first more, right?
Yeah, that's it. Exactly. So true. Yeah. And it's so much about just respecting where people are at, if they recoil at mindfulness, all right, pay attention to that.
Yeah. Or go back to what they want to talk about. Like, again, this kind of bookshelf attitude, dare I say, that lots of counselors have, where they have this real structured black and white idea on how sessions should look, but actually the client usually is bringing stuff. They don't just turn up for counselling for the fun of it. They're usually turning it up because they're in pain. There's something tangible that they want to sit with and explore.
I mean, I think I should ideally feel like they're in charge of the process. They get to kind of dictate what happens in the sessions, what's covered, what's focused on, what's going to be helpful for them.
Like all about it being client-led, and that is keeping this space safe for them. That's lighting that sensory issues, and that's also what we talk about. And whether if we are going on tangents, as Sophie's talked about previously, whether we bring them back or if they're comfortable just exploring the tangent, So it's really building that safety and that relatability and that attunement, and just working with what the client brings us and what they're comfortable with exploring.
Yeah, great. So what if the client says, absolutely not going to go there? Like, do we feel that it's necessary to get there, or can counselling kind of go around that, grow around that?
That's a bit of a tough one, because I'm in a bit of two minds around it, because my instinct is we can totally do that without doing that the way you think we're going to do that.
Good point.
That flexibility around it. But it can also be something completely separate to the therapy space of try something like Tai Chi, try something that is more slow but physical exercise, because that is still you being mindful about your movements. It's you taking that time out to be in your body and away from, all the cognitive thoughts.
Yeah.
So there's ways to do this without it being boring or in a way that we don't want to do it. But at the same time, there's also a lot of work that I think we can do cognitively, but we do hit a limit. And that's where some things like art therapy or music therapies, or even more body-based sort of somatic therapies, are bottom up. So rather than cognitive, so coming top down, they're bottom up, their body kind of emotion, kind of feeling. And exploring things like that, exploring things through art therapy, for example, can be one way to touch on that and work on that in a way that feels safer for a lot of people. So there are options, and I feel like I've basically said the same thing twice, where
that's okay.
Yes, but you kind of end up doing it anyway in a different way.
Yeah, it's limited. So if we literally said no, like if we were being really extreme and dramatic, that there was no mindfulness stuff on the cards, that would limit the therapy, because you're right, you'd stay up here, there would be CBT kind of tools, but generally speaking, mental health is here, yes, but it's a good chunk of it is here. And if we disconnect from that, if we stay away from that, we're only dealing with part of the story.
Yeah, that's it. I think that is a reality. There's still, work that can be done if we stay in a more cognitive, intellectual realm. Plenty of work that can be done. But real profound changes tend to come from other kinds of approaches.
Yeah.
And we're learning that more too. We're learning that there is more benefit or more movement in going from that bottom-up approach, or really linking that cognitive to the body again, just repairing that disconnect.
Yeah.
So it's still an area that, we're exploring and learning more about, and more therapies are coming out that properly, address that in a way that could be more effective. But it's very, I think, important to try and understand mindfulness for what it is and for what it was intentionally sort of meant to be. And the same with meditation as well, because meditation, there are so many different ways to meditate. It's not all trying to, get rid of your mind. Some of it can be focus on a picture or a piece of music and tune into that.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of it has kind of been westernized in this very, very, very distinct way that has ended up being quite unhelpful.
Yeah.
And gotten wrapped up, I guess, into this wellness culture that we have, that it can be really unhelpful, can be really harmful.
Toxic positivity.
The whole toxic positivity thing. It's mindfulness has gotten a bit wrapped up in that, unfortunately. Sometimes I feel like it's useful to just not even use the word mindfulness. Sometimes I don't even describe it that way, because we can talk about it in so many other ways.
Being present
with yourself, becoming more aware of yourself, tuning into your body, all these sorts of things. Sometimes I don't even end up using the word. And the word is what can also trigger people. So
and we're also not trying to turn people into monks, right? We're not turning ourselves into these Zen characters. And guess what, my brain still bounce around like no tomorrow. That we're not training people for this clearing brain, perfect Zen creature. We're literally just, supporting people to build a little bit more control, build a little bit more agency in understanding what's going on, but is there some things that they can do about that to shift, right? That's the kind of idea we've been talking about.
And I think that's part of it, because if you tell somebody they need to meditate, the end goal is basically monk status.
Yeah.
There's no in between. There's no, am I doing this right? There's no real kind of positive affirmation. I feel it just feels like we're not doing it right because I'm still thinking, I'm still distracted, everything's going wrong. And then we give up because we have failed.
Yes.
Then we end up hating this thing that we, have probably not been taught to do properly and effectively.
Yeah.
And it's kind of just all become a bit of a trap, I think.
Yes.
How Western has stolen this. I have opinions.
Yeah, I do too. And let me share one. And I have a bit of a laugh with clients about this. I actually have a bit of beef towards monks. Let's kind of take on this, right? So a monk usually lives in a temple, right? Usually their life is paid for, right? Like there's funds, or the community funds them. They're meditating all the time. They've got housing, they've got food, they've got a job that they do, and kind of supporting the community. They're kind of set up, right, for this life that is actually not normal. Yeah, that's great, but you're kind of put in this cocoon, or you're choosing to be in this cocoon that's actually a pretty abnormal thing, similar to an athlete, similar to someone that is so removed from the normal stresses of life. We can't really aspire to that. We can take steps towards it, but do we even really want to? Right? Like, let's make some further steps for ourselves, for our mental health, and building our awareness so it's helpful for us. But yeah, that's not the end game.
Yeah, we can't replicate those results because that is unachievable for us in our lives. And I think that's where I think just the marketing of meditation kind of fails, because how do you get that? You're just disappointed and frustrated. And then when somebody says something, they use any M word, we're just cringing. And it's like, that's not great. Let's work on just bringing us back into our bodies and creating a more whole and authentic sense of self. We can do that, I think, without the immense frustration and feeling of failure that perhaps other methods have sort of given us.
Yeah. Anything else you think we should spend some time on?
I think we could touch on a bit. So we touched on ADHD, but also a little more of autism, and particularly alexithymia, where we've just got disconnect.
Yeah.
And basically, because we have alexithymia, because it's so hard for us to connect with our body in that way, when somebody asks us, like, okay, check in, how does that make you feel? We don't know. Literally, I don't know. Like, so many of my clients, that is their only response, because they haven't been able to build that connection when they've been taught, emotions in schools. It hasn't actually connected to their body, to their sense of self. They don't have the words for that. There are so many different ways that, that kind of lesson has not really fit properly. In that, when we come in and we try to work on mindfulness, on building these skills of reconnecting with the body, it can be so hard. It can take a long time to actually feel something that isn't just like, our contact with the world around us. And that's okay. We need to, I think, validate that is part of the journey. It's going to take time. And that's completely normal for a lot of autistic people and people that are alexithymic.
Yeah, good point. And then it's just working with where the client's at with that. So you might use, art therapy, you might use other ways, even movement, other ways to really help them connect in their way, in their unique way.
Yeah, that's it. Autistic people with alexithymia might be those other clients that need that's gentler, softer, longer landing. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. I love talking about this stuff, and thank you both for your time. It's been a real pleasure, just pulling this apart and being really real about the shitty things clients, have real angst about. Like, I think it's important for us as counsellors to go there, but even just shout out to those peeps that have struggled, and for them to know there is a way around it. We can work with it. We don't have to keep pushing, this same dusty old thing that's been sitting on the bookshelf. So thank you both, and as you've been listening and watching this today, please share this. If there is a person that struggles with mindfulness, or you've had a laugh about this with some mates that your counsellor tried to do this with you, have a laugh around it. It is actually pretty interesting, but we need to make it work for the people. And at Safe Place, we want to create a spot for all of us and be the safe place for you to talk. So thanks, guys, and take care for now.
Bye.